Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. This is your weekly shot in the arm for everything motivation, inspiration, and education on your path towards success with myopia management. And I've got a stellar episode for you this week. It is all about the EssilorLuxottica achievement of FDA approval in the United States, the Stellest lens. And I've assembled an all-star panel to discuss the news, the introduction of the spectacles, and other new technologies in myopia management. So let's get rolling. I'll start with introducing Dr. Grant Miller. He's returning. He's one of our returning guests. He's from Grand Eye Care right here in the Chicagoland area. He's a partner with Treehouse Eyes Myopia Care for Kids. Grant, welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's awesome. And I feel like this is an awesome experience to have these three faces alongside with us too.
Yeah, definitely. And Dr. Tiffany Martinez is also back with us from Eyes of NM Family Optometry and Contact Lenses in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She's also a change agent for the Myopia Collective. Tiffany, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Right. And joining us for the first time is Dr. David Ng. He's here from Bayview Vision Care in Ontario. David is an advisory board member for the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here tonight.
And of course, our returning champion, founder, and past president of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, and my guest host on the supporter episodes, Dr. Kerry Herzberg. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Good to be here. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah. And so just to bring everybody who's listening up to speed, EssilorLuxottica has just achieved a major milestone in the fight against childhood myopia. The Stellest lens has become the first and only FDA market authorized spectacle lens in the United States, clinically proven to slow myopia progression in children, backed by years of research and global clinical data showing a 71% reduction in myopia progression over 2 years. Stellest represents a breakthrough moment, transforming traditional corrective eyewear into a true medical treatment. As childhood myopia rates continue to rise worldwide, this FDA authorization marks a pivotal step forward for U.S. eye care professionals and the future of myopia management. And I want to start with a discussion. This is our lead into an overall discussion about these emerging technologies, because this is a major shift in the landscape. Kerry, I want to start with you because way back when you started the AAOMC, I grew up in your practice, and orthokeratology was really the modality of myopia management. We didn't even call it myopia management back then. What does this mean for the industry as a whole from your perspective as one of the pioneers of this of our specialty?
Well, it's huge, Matt, and you can't underplay this thing. It's to have now the second approval, FDA approval of a myopia control device in the form of spectacles now, and then to know that the low-dose atropine is around the corner as far as another FDA approval. I mean, the reason now is, what's your excuse, right, for not doing this? I mean, what's holding you, there were reasons in the past, maybe people that want to try different kinds of technologies because of that reason. And now that you have FDA approval, I think this is a huge step forward for the whole industry.
Yeah. It cannot be understated enough what this is going to do to the landscape here in the United States. David, you've been using myopia spectacles in your practice in Ontario because this technology was approved, way before it's been approved in the United States. So you have experience with this technology. So I'm hoping you can give us a little bit of a preview into the spectacles and how they've been implemented in your practice, and give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think, for all of us, especially my colleagues in the States, it's going to change what you do pretty drastically, right? Because, it's like before you were like driving a car with three wheels, and now we're giving you the fourth wheel. You're just going to speed up really quickly. The bit sort of where we've adopted it, because I'm an ortho-K doc, so I've been doing ortho-K for decades. And, when the products started to come out in 5-6 years ago, I didn't see it having a big position in the practice. I accepted it, opened the accounts, and here we are 5-6 years later. And I would say for my junior associates, it's probably their go-to myopia product of choice. Probably our newest doctor. I was just asking Nicole today. Our newest doctor has been with us for about a year, still trying to get a grasp of ortho-K fitting. He did 9 spectacles last month. That's 2 a week. That's phenomenal. So here we have a junior doc that might not be well versed in ortho-K, but as soon as they start working, they're off to the races. They can do myopia management right away. So it just lowers that barrier for all practitioners. And I think a lot of my colleagues, they're kind of afraid of ortho-K. Again, this eliminates the excuse. You can start right away with ophthalmic lenses.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great point. And Tiffany, you're an established orthokeratologist. If I remember correctly, it's your bread and butter, treatment modality. Do you see a place for, spectacles and in your practice, or, are you just going to keep doing ortho-K,
Oh my God, yes. I've been waiting for so long. I've been telling patients, well, you can go to China, you can go to Canada. I have some friends in Canada. So, there's a place for all of them. And I don't think there's any one treatment that's right for every patient. So I love ortho-K. I love the freedom it gives kids. I love them to be able to have the flexibility and not be so stuck in glasses. But there's just some kids that it's not the right treatment or it's not the right time. And especially for our littles, it's going to be a game changer. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait to see what happens once, this starts getting, more and more popularized, because I feel like it's filling a niche. It's filling a part of this paradigm that's been missing. Grant, you posted on LinkedIn specifically about the reception to these spectacles. I'm hoping you can go more into that. I also want to hear about your plans. Are you going to be implementing the spectacles? What is that going to look like? And tell us about why you wrote the post. Because it was kind of like hey, we should accept this technology, because whatever helps the patient, we should be in favor of.
And that's what matters at the end of the day. It's not about, my success, how much money I make. It's cool to make money, but, we're talking about one of the biggest organizations that is around eye care. And so when you come from an awareness standpoint, they have their hand everywhere. And so one of our biggest challenges is we say, hey, we want to do this. And they're like, huh, what is this? And so if we can build those steps up and get more kids in treatment, then, we have less 28 millimeter axial length patients like me. Kids don't deserve that. They need to be treated as soon as possible. And this is potentially easier than what we've had before.
Mm-hmm. And is there hesitation from, I know there's an old guard when it comes to myopia management, or specifically ortho-K, it should be the only treatment modality. I've seen it online. You see a post on Facebook or on LinkedIn or other social media where somebody says, hey, I've never done myopia management before, but I have a patient. I think my site would be a great treatment option. And they're almost shouted down by some of the old guard about, no, you should be doing ortho-K and only ortho-K. So I'm going to open this up to the panel. How well do we think that this is going to be received? Because realistically, you're looking at a new option for doctors who are intimidated by ortho-K or other options in the past. But why is there such a resistance to, because we're kind of widening the spotlight of options, right? So I'll open this up to whoever wants to jump in first. Where does this resistance come from?
I think this is old. I mean, I've run across this back in the day in my own practice, and it's fitting kids with contact lenses. I think there's still doctors out there today. Back in the 80s, there certainly were a lot of doctors out there who were questioning the efficacy to fit kids with contact lenses, period, just because of the risk factors that are involved with contact lens wear among the little kids. So I think that the MiSight and ortho-K have this problem because there's doctors out there who won't fit kids. And it's understandable, to a degree, if you think about it from some angles, that there is more risk definitely than wearing glasses to this thing. And, our argument in the past has always been that, there may be risks to wearing contact lenses, but it's a lower risk than watching a child progressively get worse, with their myopia. So you balance that out. Now they have glasses where they can actually lower that risk immediately, and they don't have to have that concern again. So I think in my opinion, I think part of it dates from the fact that a lot of doctors just refuse to fit kids with contacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're going to be more open to the spectacles. Go ahead, Tiffany.
There's also always going to be resistance to something new and change, right? So I was talking to Dr. Ton Mai about this, and he gave the analogy of a seatbelt. And when seatbelts first came out, it was like, it was a suggestion, and maybe we should try it. And now if you get in a car without a seatbelt, it's like, oh, no, this is a problem. Like, who are you? Why would you not wear your seatbelt, right? And so I think there's that shift that'll happen, but it may not happen right away, especially when something's brand new.
Yeah. David, did we see a shift like that in Canada when this kind of the anti-myopia spectacles, were first introduced? Did we see a higher adoption rate? Was there any resistance from Canadian optometrists?
I don't think there was resistance, but the products get launched and we're all excited about it, but it happens slowly. So what I'm telling some of my colleagues, they're all gung ho. No, let's do 10 kids starting tomorrow. And I go, wait a minute, doc, you got to slow down. Like, do 1 or 2 first, make sure you dispense it, make sure it's good. Then you can do more. Just like starting out with Ortho K, right? You do 1, make sure you got everything down, make sure the fit's good. Your staff know the follow-up schedule. Then you continue growing it. Because if you do a whole bunch of Stellest dispenses in one shot, you're not going to have an easy day, because there's sort of things that your staff need to work out, and that just takes time.
Yeah. And what kind of things are we talking about? Can you be more specific?
Yeah. So the biggest thing, one of the biggest challenge we found out is our opticians knew nothing about myopia management, because prior to the spectacle option, they didn't have to be part of the conversation. They just did our glasses. And when we started dispensing, moms and dads would be sitting with the opticians to say, how does this work again? Like, why did Dr. Ng choose this one and not the contact lens that, someone else has? And they just couldn't answer. They had to scramble and find one of the other staff that were trained in myopia. So that was a wake-up call for us. We had to get the opticians up and running very, very quickly. And, just so they were proficient in answering questions. And just all the little things, like getting your dispensary ready. Like, prior to this, I might have had 20, 25 pediatric frames, and they were kind of like here and there. Now you need a big repertoire of frames. You need frames that fit small heads, no bridges. They have to be kind of indestructible. There's lines out there that are really, really good. Many of them have like straps or adapters around the ear, just so they stay centered on those faces, those tiny little faces. That's going to be a big challenge. It's just a lot of things you're going to have to work through with your office. Like, how are you going to do warranties? Essilor doesn't even know what the warranty is going to be in the United States. I'll tell you, in Canada, they didn't know in the beginning either. And they came out with 12 months. And then now I think they're up to 15 months because of other competitors. You have to know the parameters. Your staff need to know the parameter ranges, the materials. It's not available in the sun or transition photochromatic material. And it isn't in Canada. In Canada, they have clear polycarb and they have their suns. That's it. So you can imagine, as a parent, that's in the decision-making process. If you put the kid on atropine, as an additive therapy, do I want to go between 2 pairs of glasses every time we go from inside to outside? So there's a lot of these little things that I think you'll pick up. Like, I mean, a year or 2 years from now, what I tell you is going to be like, oh yeah, we all know that. But it's all these growing pains that we went through. And, what we're trying to do at VBD, we had to revamp all our slides this past week, just for those that are attending, to kind of like save you 6 months to 12 months of heartache that we had to go through when we were learning how to do it.
Right. Yeah. I imagine there's a lot of compliance issues. I think that's one of my primary concerns. I mean, I'm a fan of whatever treats the patient, whether that's spectacles or my side, Ortho K, whatever. As long as it's treating the patient effectively, I'm all for it. But I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm wondering if the other panelists are as well, as we're hungry to get our hands on this technology and start implementing it in modern practice. Because, and I'll open this up to the panel, but my initial concern is I've seen kids who, for lack of a better term, glasses abuse, right? Like, they don't wear their glasses correctly, or they get damaged, or in a lot of cases, they're not wearing them to boot. So I'm wondering about the compliance concerns. And I'm curious to see, or hear what the other panelists have to say. Tiffany, let's start with you. What are your initial concerns about this particular aspect?
That point got brought up to me. I was talking to Justin about this, Justin Kwan, and I think that I think how you educate your patient is going to make a big difference. So there's a big risk of non-compliance for atropine, but my patients are usually pretty compliant. And I think maybe because we keep a close eye on them, so we see them at least every 3 months, if not every 6 weeks, just to kind of check in, to check their axial length, to see how they're doing. And I think that check-in helps to keep them more compliant. I also always tell my parents that if the kids aren't wearing their glasses, they're really good at communicating, but they usually do it non-verbally. So if they're taking their glasses off, to me, that tells me that the glasses may be not the right tool and we need to think about something else. So that's kind of my thought on if they're not wearing the glasses. Well, let's get back to the drawing board and see why they're not wearing, because especially a myopic kid, if they put on glasses, they should see way better. So to me, that seems like they would want to wear their glasses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Grant, I once sat in on with a patient, 15-year-old kid, and his mom was still putting in his Ortho-K lenses for him at night. And I was shocked. But the fact remains that the kid was, the opposite of compliance, I guess. You work all the time with kids that really, really struggle oftentimes with INR. And I've watched you just, time after time, patiently sit with them, work with them until they eventually get it. Is this going to be a game changer, having a glasses option for those kids that are just not able to, get Ortho-K?
Yeah. And that's part of the fun and excitement here is, as much as all four of us here would love to fit Ortho-K in every single patient, sometimes it's tough and, and you give up and what do you do? Well, here, let's try to put a bigger soft lens on. That might be more challenging. And then it's like, well, let's beat the front surface of your eye up with atropine for 2, 3, 4, 10 years. And so this is, again, I just go back to, this is easier. And, easier is not always best, but when you have those patients that you get that read on, if I can make it easier on them, hopefully that's easier for compliance and success of treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm also wondering about those, scenarios where, I've watched doctors present everything in their portfolio. And Carrie, I grew up in your practice where it was Ortho-K all day, every day. That's what the doc wanted to fit. So that's what you pushed. And the entire office was around that. Is this going to not mix up, but is this going to complicate the treatment portfolio? And I want David to weigh in on this as well, because you actually are using anti-myopia spectacles in your practice. I mean, Carrie, if we had this back in the day, that would have been an absolute, game changer for a lot of patients who simply couldn't wear Ortho.
Okay. So I could change the thread a little bit here because I just got back from Japan, and it was a combined ophthalmology meeting between Chinese and Japanese ophthalmologists. It was very interesting to be there. I talked to a lot of researchers, mainly from China, but also in Japan. Hiroko was there, Dr. Hiroko, who was the author of the 10-year study on the famous 10-year study on Ortho-K safety and efficacy. So it's a pretty famous gathering. And my background is computer vision syndrome. Okay. Even, as old as Ortho-K is, I was also taught computer vision syndrome to doctors, teaching how to use computers, ergonomics, and the rest of this thing. So this has always been a big deal to me. And the other fact that I want to throw out there is the fact that most doctors, maybe I'm wrong and people could call me on it. Most doctors don't do near point testing. All right. So I am concerned, and these concerns were actually, quantified in Japan. They were actually answered by some researchers that, they're legitimate, that, what are we doing actually to the visual system here? My site has plus in it to create the defocus. So I'm giving plus to the patient when they do near point. Ortho-K develops a plus add when they take the lenses off. So they're also getting help for near point. 70% of people, kids or adults who spend 2 hours or more on computers get computer vision syndrome. And what am I doing with this lens now that's using a distance-only prescription? Okay, because the prisms don't do any plus, they're just defocus. So I'm giving this patient a minus lens to look through. And particularly in low myopes, my experience with low myopes has been with patients that they take their glasses off when they want to read. And there's a good reason for that. They can see better. up close. So you'll see a lot of low myopes back in the day when there were single vision lenses prescribed, didn't wear their glasses because they had to do a lot of reading and they hurt. Actually, they had eyes had to focus harder. We had experiences in this conference where doctors were talking about the fact that the kids were telling them they're using atropine and the spectacles. They said they couldn't see their paper. They couldn't read the questions on the paper. They had to back off some of these prescriptions, because they're actually, atropine lowers your accommodative facility, and Stellest doesn't have a reading ad. So, yeah, there's going to be patients that are going to be fine with this, but there's other patients that won't be. And unfortunately, most of our colleagues don't do near point testing. How are they even going to know, what we're actually doing to these visual systems? The docs here on this panel, I have no problem with. The docs in the academy, I have no problem with. A lot of the docs in the, around there that show those concerns, I know they're going to do the right, take care of these problems. But as in China, that people should be aware of this. People don't need a prescription to get these lenses. Okay, glasses, spectacle lenses are not controlled. Patients can walk up and get anything they want with, a script. They can have their eyes checked, just a refraction. So they're getting fit here in China with a lot of no follow-up at all. Who knows if they're even working. And the last comments that I'll make on this thing is one of the researchers I talked to said they think, they first start out that they think we have an ethnic problem with this thing. He said, because our findings, our results, these are the researchers, they're taking actual findings, don't match the results that you're talking about. They're not seeing it in their test results with these lenses. They're not seeing those results. And they think maybe it's an ethnicity problem. I don't think so. I think it's a compliance issue. I think these kids are not wearing the glasses. And David could speak to this because he's experienced. But
yeah, definitely, David.
These are my concerns with this product.
Yeah, Carrie, that near point concern you have was real for us during COVID, because we were able to get some of the lens lines before COVID. So we had kids in them, and then we couldn't see the kids during COVID, and we follow up with these kids, and the prescriptions and axial lengths just went through the roof, and we couldn't figure it out. And, we kind of scratched our heads and we said, you know what, the kids that have catapulted in terms of their axial lengths are like the -1s, -150s, because those are the kids that without the glasses on, the computer was perfect.
Right.
So for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, other than going out of the house, they didn't wear their glasses. So they weren't getting any treatment. So that's one thing we've realized with the compliance. And I think Essilor and all the other companies are very, very sort of adamant about compliance. Essilor in their paper that they sent out to all the members, I think they said minimum 10 hours a day. The studies were 12 hours or more. So you have to counsel the patients. It's full time. Don't tell them at least 10 hours. You do that, you're going to do 8. You say it's from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed every single day. That's when you have to wear them. So compliance was and is still a huge issue. So if I see a kid come in with the spectacle lenses and axial lengths are going faster than what I expect, you got to check the compliance, 100%.
David, I thought that this is kind of the gorilla in the room here. First off, okay, we're focusing so much on axial length changes, and for a good reason. We've got a myopia epidemic, but we have visual function to talk about as well. Are we doing, we need to consider both aspects. And if we're exposing a child who's doing she's on a computer screen for 6-8 hours, more cell phones held within, very close to the eye. And we're doing this to a patient, and we're intentionally causing their focusing to even be more of a problem for them. Is this really a good idea? I mean, certain patients can handle this, other patients can't. I mean, if you were to say, okay, let's do vision training on them, let's take care of this other problem, let's do rehab, but that's not going to happen. And I'm worried about the fact that, given this product out there right now, that there's going to be a lot of abuse. We're just going to make this thing worse for these kids who are already on computers too much to begin with.
Yeah, you're probably right. We are seeing that in Canada right now. I don't know what the legislation is in the US, but optometrists and opticians can dispense all these products. And, not to say anything bad about my optician colleagues, but the independent optician does no follow-up. That's a fact. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a pretty darn good one. I don't want to, put any sort of bad light on it. I've used the spectacles I would say for exactly the kids that can't wear Ortho-K or they're not ready for it, I would say, we monitored a number of our spectacle patients, and for some reason, it kind of hovers around 10%, 15% of all our myopia management cases. It doesn't grow from there. And again, we went back and we're looking at the numbers, and I'm talking to my manager. I said, like, we're fitting a ton of them. They're not like growing. They're always like the same percentage of all the cases we have. What's going on? And she goes, oh, you always flip them to Ortho-K when the time's right. So you're always going to lose. They always convert from a spectacle myopia patient to an Ortho-K patient when it's time. So, and I checked with all the other doctors, and pretty much all the other doctors in my office do the same thing. So spectacles allows us to start treatment much earlier. A lot of moms and dads don't want to use atropine. They don't like the medicine word, but they're okay with glasses. And that's where we've kind of seen it. It's sort of morphed its own position now. It's just happened organically. So 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, they'll start in the spectacles. And once they get 7, 8, 9, and they're ready, they move into Ortho-K. So it's actually grown our Ortho-K practice because now we're able to handle kids at a younger age.
Yeah, and that's what you two both pointed on is where my excitement comes from, because Carrie talks about the abuse. So more progressive myopes. What do we do now? Oh, I don't do Ortho-K. All right, you're coming to us now. You're coming to us for other specialty treatments. And then when you mentioned that 10-hour data, when that came out to the US, I was like, every other study's been 12 hours. So now we're going to tell them less. We know compliance, they're going to potentially eat a few hours out of that. And then it's like, okay, they're wearing it 8 hours, less than we say 6 days a week, potentially less than that. And so I feel like that's going to lead to more of this issue of, hey, we're going to get a great peak, but then there's going to be this change afterwards where we see a dip and people are kind of like, what do we do? Why is it not working? And so that's where the excitement comes, is that I see the back end of that funneling back in towards me.
Right. Tiffany, I'm very interested to hear what your point of view is, because, I'm have this concern about how is this going to affect myopia on a larger scale, because we've seen the need for some damage control when you have doctors who are not doing myopia management correctly, or even not doing it all, but claiming that they do it. I've been in practices that claim that they're doing myopia management, but then I can tell within 5 minutes that they have no idea what they're talking about. They might have tried to fit my site or something one time and it just didn't work out, but they're still using all the buzzwords. So I'm interested in your reaction to what has already been said on the panel, but also that particular aspect of it. Is this potentially damaging to everything that we've done so far up to this point?
I think one of the biggest challenges we see with myopia management is getting awareness. And so this is going to bring awareness to it. So even if they go to a doctor's office and they're like, oh, we fit these lenses, and then they don't do it well and their prescription continues to progress, at least the conversation's getting started and they know that there is something that can be done. And so then maybe they do find us doctors who invest a lot of time and energy, money in fitting better lenses and doing more treatment and being part of Treehouse and just all these different things that we do, being ambassadors for myopia. I think it's going to help us, right? I don't think it's going to hurt it's just more awareness. So more people knowing about it is never going to be a bad thing, I think.
Yeah. And it also makes me wonder if it's going to further develop the pedigree of the specialists, like yourselves on the call. If you have this adoption of the spectacles by an ECP who wouldn't normally do myopia management, they're going to start running into those cases or those conversion issues. I'm wondering if it's just going to elevate all of the existing docs who are doing MiSight and orthokeratology. So I'll open that up to the panel. Do we think that that's going to help elevate, the industry as a whole?
I mean, I personally feel like that because it's, we talk about more patient aware means more potential for MiSight, means more potential for Ortho-K. That means that we can also grow those product portfolios up too. And so, some of the industry talks I've had, you want to think that they're going to be, oh no, this giant, optical consumer company is going to ruin everything. But, we I'm just going to throw out a number. Like if we're looking at this as 1% of eye care, and this bumps us up to 1.5% of kind of what eye care includes, that's a win. And if it's 0.5%, if it's 10%, like end of the day, that's important to really getting us to treat these younger kids. Because I'd love to do more ortho K in a -3, not a -6 and a -8 and a -10. So, but I can thank Carrie for going down that rabbit hole of crazy ortho K fits.
Yeah, Carrie, speaking of in your practice, you've fit very young patients in ortho K, and
Yes.
this is going to be a better option for those kids that because it was a very special kind of kid that could wear ortho K lenses and could do INR or at least work with their parents. So, are we going to see a higher adoption rate, do you think, amongst younger patients? And then, to David's point, are those going to convert into future ortho K patients?
Definitely. I think that, you're raising, the pool is larger now. I mean, the water level's risen everywhere. Everything's going to do better with this because it's going to raise awareness, as everybody's pointed out here. And I think that's a great thing because we need more awareness. But let me throw something else out there with you guys.
Sure.
I think eventually what's going to become a myopia specialist, myopia control specialist, is going to have to be a binocular vision specialist. So I think the separation of functional binocular vision from what the rest of what we're doing is connecting. It's not getting further apart. It's actually going together. And despite the fact that there hasn't been any findings so far that's shown a direct correlation between those two things, I see it nonstop in my practice all the time. Give you an example. We have an ortho K patient starts in their progressing myope, and they have other kinds of issues going on. They might have ESO, they might have EXO, might have accommodative facility, might have a giant lag to go on. When I finish my ortho K in that patient, they're fine again. I've corrected that vision problem with ortho K. I've straightened most of those issues out. That's a free ride for me because it means that I didn't have to do VT or other things on that patient. With these other modalities, other than MySight, which actually provides, again, the additional plus, which will help, they'll help with the near point. These other modalities with low dose atropine, with the spectacle prescriptions, are not going to make this easier for the child to do their work. Okay. And unless we address those near point problems with solutions for them, we're not really solving part of their problem here. We're creating more issues for them. In fact, it might even impact their learning. So we have to really kind of answer that question as well. And I know this has been, we started out with this thing back in the 1980s and everybody said it's all genetics. Myopia is nothing but genetics. And now we find out that, what did that mean? That was a free ride for all of us because it meant nothing, no matter what we did, they're going to get more nearsighted. Now today, we turn that whole thing around to the other side, and now we're aware of what we're doing to a patient will have an impact on how they progress in their vision, and will have an impact on how they learn. So I'm throwing this out there. I think that the research I've seen, the research coming out of China is very fascinating. We're going the other direction here. We're going to have to, the one thing that bothers me is that most of my colleagues don't do near point testing, don't do dynamic retinoscopy. They don't even do retinoscopy. That's like an MD doesn't even use the stethoscope. Doesn't know how to use that instrument. So I think, to be able to understand what this patient is going through, I think we need to do this near point and functional vision testing. And I think that's the only way we can really understand what we're actually doing to the visual system when we prescribe this particular device, when we put atropine on their eye. What is that doing to their accommodative facility? So until that begins to happen, and it's actually great news for everyone who's really concerned, because it means that they're going to really be able to separate themselves from everyone else who's just going to, no follow-up, just going to prescribe a spectacle lens. It means that there's a lot more work to be done here, until the job is done. We're not even that far along in this journey that I began in the early 1980s.
Yeah.
Can I follow up on that? I have a quick question. You mentioned that ortho K fixes your BV issues. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's fascinating because, like, you'd have a patient who's had a lousy accommodative facility. You can't focus. I mean, the PRA and NRA, and you finish the ortho K part, and it's back to normal. It's back to which they've never been at before. So it fixes those kinds of accommodative issues, and likewise with the convergence issues that go along with that, with your ACAs and everything else. Most patients, I should have published these results because I did this on all my patients. I found out that magically I'm fixing their binocular issues. Take a look yourself. I would encourage doctors here to do the testing and do it post, pre and post, and see what happens to their visual function. It improves dramatically, and I think that MySight has a solution here that I'm comfortable with because of the plus that it gives a patient, right? Because that's going to help a lot of facility patients. So I don't have any problem with that.
Your theory?
I'm
Is that your theory by about how it works? Is that it's the outer plus that helps with?
You mean in ortho K or any kind of use of plus?
Or my site, yeah.
I have found out that my dad grew up with plus a halves. I mean, they used to say that, this is the guy just trying to sell a pair of glasses, right? Or that this is smoke and mirrors. They used to criticize him. His colleagues used to criticize him. Well, that plus a half a lot of times corrected these issues binocular issues he was dealing with. So plus and more, I don't know about you guys, but I found in my life, patients come in, they want to see distance. They tell you they want to see distance. They don't want to see distance. They want to see near point. That's what they're doing all day. And plus, they need more and more of it. You can facilitate, you facilitate that into the prescription, it's a good idea to do that because it's going to ease their symptoms tremendously. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Grant, sorry to cut you off. What were your part?
Oh, no, it was. So what Carrie's talking about with that binocular vision aspect of it, that was what was interesting when this kind of clinical data out of Stellest came out, is it says, oh, hey, there's no impact on binocular vision.
Yeah, right.
And so as you dive more into this, that's been part of my excitement is we know a lot of our commercial docs. So this is for you listeners that are considering getting into this. We need to check binocular vision because we are going to see limitations with this. We're going to see that some of those issues are what's causing some progression, but then symptoms are going to decrease compliance. So it doesn't have to be the full gamut, like you're a VT doc doing everything head to toe, but just assess some of that posture, assess some of that flexibility on the amplitudes. And then you'll kind of know, hey, will I potentially run into issues with this lens? If that is an option that is possible, then I need to consider my side or Ortho K to give them some of that benefit to help out up close.
Yeah. It makes me wonder if this is going to bring in more docs off of the sidelines and turn them into myopia management specialists, specifically with the FDA approval, which I think is absolutely huge. When I was with J&J, the Ability Overnight lens had FDA approval attached, to the selling strategy for that for that lens. And I would see a lot of docs who would say, I'm ready to get into Ortho K now because the FDA approval is something that I can position to my patients. I now feel comfortable trying this out. And it makes me wonder if this is going to pull more docs off the sidelines with more FDA approved items, because we're looking at essentially two different kinds of myopia management strategies. You could go with atropine or spectacles, or a MiSight option, or you could go into Ortho K. And so I'm wondering if this is going to give us more docs interested in doing myopia management. And then I'm also wondering if this is going to be that Crest toothpaste moment that Carrie keeps referencing on the podcast, where, do we have a future where myopia management could finally become mainstream? David, what do you think about that? Because you've been, in Canada, y'all have been using these anti-myopia spectacles as part of your treatment protocol. Has it brought in more docs off the sidelines in Canada?
I would say absolutely it has, because it's easy to fit. So like I said, with my young junior doctors, they can start getting into the myopia business right away. It's so we have more kids in these myopia management products, the ophthalmic lenses, but Gary's right. They get fitted, and, most of my colleagues are pretty good with the follow-up. And if there's a problem, they'll fix it. And if they can't fix it, they'll refer to a colleague that can. Unfortunately, a lot of kids don't get the follow-up care, right? Like we even haven't had the conversation of Big Box, which is a huge player with them in the myopic ophthalmic lens business. They just dispense the glasses and gone, and no follow-up whatsoever. Another challenge you guys are going to have very, very quickly. It's going to be your margins are going to be healthy in the beginning for the first 2 years. Then it's going to be a race to the bottom. And it's not you guys causing it. It's Big Box that does it. And in Canada, one of the major lines has teamed up with Costco. And Costco now sells myopia management lenses that are Health Canada approved at my cost. I get them in for what Costco sells it for. And that's a tough nut to crack, right? So, but the first 2 years are great. right? I had bundle pricing, and I was the only game in town, and you had to buy from me, right? Or you buy from my colleague down the street. It was the same price. So that's something, if you could look in that crystal ball 1 or 2 years from now, you're going to have to deal with that. And, we deal with it right now in our dispensaries with regular glasses and regular contacts. So it's not going to be anything new for us, but it's something that is going to happen.
Can you imagine, panel, thinking about this for a moment, all the doctors that won't or don't charge correctly for myopia services, myopia control services that they do on their patients, give it away for free, right? I mean, okay, here's is this a catastrophe waiting to happen? Where are they going to get paid? How are they going to make a living? How are they going to open the door and turn the lights on? If they don't, if they don't charge for services right now, if this is one key thing that should come out of this whole talk, right, is freaking charge for your services, please, because you're going to have to, because down the road here, you're not going to make it on materials. But I'll tell you, back in the 1980s, okay, the AOA came to us and said to us, they said, you guys were charging, in our fees. He said, you guys are going to have to switch everything around. You're going to have to switch out of materials into the services part. And we did it, and it was hard at first to do that. But we said, thank you for that advice, because it allowed us then to make a living afterwards when the materials, race to the bottom, which happens inevitably in any of these fields. So I'm telling you today, right now, if we don't start charging for these things, if we still give this away, like we're afraid to say, we're doing this because this is a valuable thing, because we're afraid to charge for something like this, then where all this leads, right? It's a catastrophe for the profession, and that's the thing that I think is one of the most important things we could address with our colleagues with education about myopia and everything else is please charge for your time.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes me wonder about a larger question too. And since we have representation from the Myopia Collective and the AAOMC, Treehouse Eyes, et cetera, what can we be doing as this group who has been invested in myopia management for some time now? And how can we transmit this message effectively to the average ECP? I don't want this future where we are re-rolling that rock back up the mountain like Sisyphus. Yeah. I think that's the right analogy, but like we put in so much work. I remember my early days running the booth for the AAOMC. I try to tell doctors about the academy and about Ortho-K, and they would look at me and say, "How dare you? You can't do this to kids. This is unethical." And I'd be like, "Unethical? What?" I know hundreds of doctors who have helped, so many patients. So are we going to be back in that position where we're going to be re-rolling that rock back up the mountain? And how do we fix that problem? Because now it's an education. The education issue is now even bigger. So Grant, what do you think?
We're human beings, and I think we go through cycles. So I anticipate us to always, get excited and run right into the same thing. So, but I'm also the person that's like, who knows what happens? So as long as you just try, and trial by error is what my whole life is of, we're going to mess up and make mistakes, but, we can try to learn from them. But like I said, with how we act, I feel like it's going to go in a circle that it does every couple decades on that, Dave and Carrie here touched on.
Yeah. Tiffany, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think that where we are right now is that it's going to fall back in the laps of all of us who actually do this, who care about it, who want to do it. And it might start with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of people. This is easier. It's easier to engage, but my site's easier. And I did a CE for some of my colleagues locally, and it was like they were afraid of the price tag of it. So they weren't offering it because they didn't think people would pay for it. And so I think it's going to come back to us. I think it's just more of like, it gives them a tool. We get more awareness. People get to talk about it. Now our patients actually know that there's something that we can do about it. And so, but then they're going to find that they're not following up. And so then I think it'll trickle back to, okay, well, who is actually doing this and doing it well? So I'm with Carrie though. I love that whole, like, get your services out there and charge for your services and bring value to your services. And I'm with you. If all of us could do that, even like the big box places, charge for the services, because those docs aren't making any money off of the lenses either. And it's a service that we're providing for patients. So
yeah, I'm encouraged by, I met several doctors who were working out of Walmarts who were interested in ortho-K. And I was, if I didn't know Glenda Alamon, I would have been like, pinch me, right? This is crazy, but it does happen. So it makes me wonder if that kind of adoption rate, at least in that environment. I mean, what David was saying about with Costco sounds like a nightmare scenario. So I'm wondering, David, you mentioned, everything is now changed at Vision by Design. What is the Academy prepared to do, I guess, is my next question, in order to, like lead the charge as far as education for, optometrists out there, as this future is unfolding with, what you said about the first 2 years and then it being a race to the bottom.
So I would say there's a silver lining to this story. It's not all gloom and doom. So I'm going to tell you what I see. So when we had that, and it was actually Hoya that made that decision. I wrote probably the meanest letter that I could write, being a nice guy, to my rep, saying, I'm not going to do your lens ever again. But you couldn't help it. They're the gorilla. They were the first ones out of the gate. So they were the dominant player. They are the dominant player in Canada, and they have the most robust research behind them, 8 years of evidence, et cetera, et cetera. What we started seeing is a shift where patients were purchasing from Costco, not necessarily our patients, but patients were purchasing from Costco. And we started to see these families start to come into our office, new patients to the office, maybe patients we lost over a couple of years. And the reason why they were coming in is because the myopia wasn't being controlled. It was still getting worse, even though the child was wearing these glasses. And Matt, I'll tell you, they all come in and they're wearing the glasses on their bridge, basically, because there was no follow-up tightening the frame. There was no follow-up making sure that, everything was working properly, compliance in terms of wearing, visual hygiene. Of course, big box doesn't do stuff like that, or most of them don't do stuff like that. So it's going to fall apart. Just because you have a great product, if you don't use it properly, it's not going to work. Right. So we started actually getting more patients in the office because their product they bought elsewhere just wasn't working. And maybe we did keep them in spectacles. Maybe we converted them to ortho-K. I think a lot I converted to ortho-K. But regardless, that awareness and education, if they didn't go to Costco and purchase those glasses, I don't think they would have found me.
Interesting. Yeah. It's like creating an opportunity. And, Carrie, that's like what we've been talking about, this whole time, echoed, by the rest of the panel about, having confidence in what you're doing, charging appropriately, being that amazing optometrist, eye care provider, optician, staff member, whoever you are in that practice, to offer that different kind of experience. Because to David's point, if they're not going to get it right out of the box with the glasses, and then they have to come to you, it's like, you need to be poised and ready to take advantage of that opportunity and treat that patient and take care of the problem. So, I mean, that's what we've been saying all along, essentially.
It's the theme of Vision by Design. It's the theme that ran through the whole creation of it, and it does the heart well to see it thriving and doing well. So, but the challenge has always been to grow more of our colleagues, into this frame of mind to take better care of their kids. So, I mean, that's where we're at today. It's what do we face as far as challenges of the future? We face exactly this, but there's not enough of us around. Okay. We need to have more and more of us doing this thing and being concerned and taking care of our patients properly. And, that's something we all need to work on.
Yeah.
And having that binocular vision perspective, I think you're totally right. I totally agree. The more I've gotten into doing vision therapy and the more I understand vision on a more profound level, the more I'm like, this is a tool and it can help these people, but we need to get more to the root cause of why they're having these problems to begin with. And as we start addressing the root cause, we might actually find that we can slow down myopia without actually doing anything, because we address the right issue, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
It's that preventative care mentality.
Yeah, and we're going there. It's taken us a while, but you can see where the wheels are coming. I can see where it's going. So I think that's where we're going to head it up here. So
Yeah. Well, let's close on that. Unless anybody has any final thoughts about, what we've discussed. I would love to have the panel back on after this has been fully launched out there. I don't want to wait 2 years, but I do want to revisit this conversation. And so thank you, everyone. We'll go around and give some contact information if anybody wants to get in touch with you. We'll start with Grant. If anybody has any questions about anything we've talked about and they want to reach out to you specifically, how can they get in touch with you online?
I'm always on LinkedIn, just talking nonsense about myopia 24/7. So hit me up on there. Email is grantmillerod@gmail.com. And as I always say, if you know Matt and Matt likes you enough, he will give you my cell phone number and you can text or call me anytime.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Tiffany, how about yourself?
I have gone off of all social media. So Tiffany Martinez OD at Gmail is the best way to get a hold of me.
I'm jealous. Yeah, I'm on a mission to get off of social media as well. That is a tough nut to crack for sure. David, how about yourself?
It's email dng@bayviewvisioncare.com. And just quick shout out to VBD. That's literally next week. The number of changes that have been made with the agenda in the past 10, 14 days has been pretty drastic to try to help everyone's that's going to be attending and all the members, how to adopt the Stellest product easier into your practice. Myself, I'll be speaking, and also Sheila Morrison, who's also a Canadian doc with lots of experience with ophthalmic lenses. So hopefully we can help our colleagues so you don't get the headaches that we had 6 years ago.
Right. And that's the whole point amongst many of Vision by Design is learn from all of these great doctors who have come before you and are still learning to this very day. Carrie, if anybody has any questions for you online, how should they get in touch with you?
Email oaadoc@gmail.com.
Awesome. And, for my part, if you've enjoyed this episode, there's plenty more waiting for you at myopiamindset.com. If you are interested in more, you can become a paid supporter. It's only $12 a month, which is basically the price of a cup of coffee each and every week. And I like to say, if you would buy me a cup of coffee to have on amazing guests like this panel to nerd out about myopia management, then please consider supporting the podcast. You can do so at myopiamindset.com. Thank you so much. Panel, I really appreciate you coming on with me. I'm dead serious. I want to revisit this topic after the glasses and other technologies, because we are in for a huge paradigm shift, in my opinion. So I can't wait to revisit this topic with you all once we get there. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. All right. And for everybody else, we will see you at the next one.